Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to another edition of Crimes of the Week International. Representatives from Australia's Victoria Police say that 7 people are in custody this week following a wild and terrifying armed gang confrontation that took place in broad daylight in a crowded mall. The dramatic and disturbing incident unfolded on the afternoon of May 25th at the Northland Shopping Centre in the Melbourne suburb of Preston. It began just after 2:30 p.m. when 2 groups of young people entered the mall's food court. Several of them were dressed in balaclavas and armed with machetes. Shortly after this, they began attacking each other. Police now say the violent brawl was pre-arranged by the 2 groups, who belong to rival gangs. Of course, at the time, none of the innocent bystanders inside the mall knew that. Chilling CCTV footage from the scene shows how the ordinary Sunday afternoon descended into chaos, with shoppers running for their lives and parents desperately trying to get their children to safety. Some, though, refused to be intimidated by the violence. Instead, they met the offenders head-on. One man, identified only by the name Anthony, reportedly used a chair to defend himself, allowing another Good Samaritan to disarm one of the suspects. This proved to be a significant help to the mall's security staff, who also worked to restrain the machete-wielding perpetrators until police could arrive. The whole thing came to an end a few minutes later when officers swarmed the shopping center and evacuated the building. At the same time, several of the suspects were arrested. Though it seems some initially managed to escape, currently it's been reported that all 7 of them are now in custody. While the identities of the suspects have not been released at the time of this recording, police have stated that they range in age from 15 to 21. All of them were apparently known to law enforcement prior to their arrest this week, and each is now facing charges including affray and weapons offenses. Following the incident, government officials announced that they would be fast-tracking a ban on the possession and sale of machetes in the state of Victoria. According to reports, the law was slated to come into effect in September, but due to the shocking nature of this week's incident, it's expected to be enforced starting in the next couple of days. In a statement, the Premier of Victoria said in part, quote, "The community shouldn't have to deal with these weapons in their shopping centers. Neither should our police." Thankfully, no innocent people were harmed during this week's attack. All 3 of those reportedly hospitalized were suspects who allegedly participated in the violence. Authorities in South Korea's Gyeonggi province say that 3 police officers were wounded this week, at least one seriously, after they attempted to help a domestic violence victim, only to end up targeted themselves. The whole thing began shortly before 10 p.m. on May 22nd, when a woman called emergency responders to report abuse at the alleged hands of her husband. Officers quickly responded to the victim's apartment in the city of Paju. However, it wasn't long before things spiraled out of control. While attempting to speak to the woman's husband, 3 of the officers were allegedly attacked by the man who was wielding a knife. The officers suffered wounds to their necks, arms, and other areas and were soon hospitalized. At least one of them with serious injuries. The male suspect also suffered serious injuries. However, these were apparently self-inflicted. As to what the motive behind all of this was and why the man reacted so violently, currently that's still under investigation. Though police say they are looking into whether the man was under the influence of alcohol or any other substances that may have contributed to the disturbing situation. Right now, the male suspect is still recovering, but authorities say that upon his release from the hospital, he will be investigated for attempted murder. What started out as a day of celebration for sports fans transformed into a terrifying tragedy this week after a vehicle plowed into crowds of people during the middle of a parade in the English city of Liverpool, an incident that left dozens injured. The awful situation unfolded on the evening of May 26th during the victory parade for Liverpool FC. The football club had just won the Premier League, with at least 1 million people coming out to celebrate and enjoy the festivities. The parade began in the middle of that afternoon, and the vast majority of it went exactly as planned. Crowds of people lined the streets in the city center, where the team bus was making its way along the designated route. However, just a mile before the finishing point, things took a tragic turn. Shortly after 6 p.m., a Ford Galaxy minivan was able to pass through the barricades that had been erected by police. It's believed the driver was able to do this by tailgating an ambulance that had been let through to provide assistance to someone having a heart attack. Moments later, the Ford Galaxy began barreling down Water Street, where the Liverpool FC bus had been just minutes earlier. Because the area was still extremely crowded, many were unable to get out of the way as the van indiscriminately struck and ran over people on both sides of the road. According to witnesses, the whole thing happened very quickly, but it was immediately clear something was wrong. Suddenly, screams could be heard everywhere, along with the sickening sounds of bodies colliding with the hood of the speeding vehicle. At one point, the van appeared to stall before accelerating and hitting more unlucky victims. When the vehicle finally did stop, members of the crowd began surrounding it and attempting to smash windows and get to the driver. However, police were quick to react and managed to both block the van in and calm the situation down. The driver was arrested, and meanwhile, emergency responders began tending to the dozens of wounded. Though miraculously no one was killed, at least 65 people were hurt as a result of the vehicle ramming. At least 20 of these victims were hospitalized with injuries ranging in severity, and several of the victims were said to be children. Very quickly afterwards, Merseyside police came out and stated that they did not believe the incident was terror-related. Instead, they alleged that the driver was under the influence of drugs. They also revealed that the suspect was a 53-year-old white British man from the West Derby area. Currently, the man's name has not been released, though. In terms of why the man's ethnicity and nationality were released so quickly, authorities have not expressly commented, but many believe it was to head off the spread of viral misinformation online. It's suspected that police were trying to avoid a potential repeat of last year's Southport riots, which were partially fueled by incorrect speculation early on that the suspect was an Islamic extremist. At the time of this recording, police say that they are still investigating all aspects of the case, and that the 53-year-old suspect remains in custody on suspicion of attempted murder and drug driving. Meanwhile, it appears Liverpool FC have cancelled further events celebrating their victory out of respect for the victims. Authorities in the Kenyan capital of Nairobi say that a suspect has officially been charged this week, more than 2 months after the brutal murder of a Scottish man who was visiting the country on a business trip. The case began back on February 17th of this year, when 58-year-old Campbell Scott was reported missing by worried colleagues. Campbell had flown into Nairobi on February 15th to attend a 3-day conference in the city. However, he had failed to return to his hotel room after going out the previous evening. After launching a search, police were able to recover CCTV footage from February 16th, showing Campbell walking through a parking lot. That same afternoon, cameras also captured him in the company of an unknown man. Things got even more concerning when transactions were attempted on some of the 58-year-old's credit cards in a number of different locations across Nairobi and in other cities, some of which were hundreds of miles away. Sadly, everyone's worst fears were confirmed on February 22nd, when a cattle herder about 60 miles outside of the capital in Makueni County alerted authorities to a grisly discovery. A man's body had been discovered inside of a sack filled with pineapples in a dense area of the local Makongo forest. When police checked the situation out, they were able to positively identify the man as Campbell Scott. Chillingly, his wrists and ankles had been bound with ropes. While it seems that no exact cause of death has yet been declared, multiple reports state that there were obvious signs of violence to Campbell's remains. After further investigation, it's now been revealed that police suspect Campbell was tricked into meeting up with several men under the guise of discussing a business proposal. Instead, though, he was lured to his death and brutally killed, likely for financial gain. While a number of arrests have been made over the past 2 months, so far only one person, Alex Mutua, has been charged. During court proceedings this week, he was formally charged with murder. That being said, authorities are in the process of searching for at least 2 additional suspects allegedly involved in the crime. 2 more men were previously being sought in connection with the case. However, one of them, Samuel Musembi, took his own life before he could be arrested. The other, Albinus Mutinda, is now a witness for the prosecution. Understandably, the whole situation has been a nightmare for Campbell Scott's loved ones, who never imagined that something like this would happen to him. The 58-year-old was described as having a heart of gold, and was known for his great sense of humor and for making friends wherever he went. According to reports, many of those close to Campbell will be taking part in a celebration of life for him being held this week back in the UK. A Brazilian beauty influencer says she feels lucky to be alive this week, days after she was nearly stabbed to death at the alleged hands of her boyfriend, a crime that unfolded in front of thousands of her fans. According to Brazilian media outlets, the woman in question, 22-year-old Luna Abraão, is a popular online fashion and beauty influencer in the country with over 300,000 followers on Instagram. In addition to showing off her tattoos and modeling her own line of bikini wear, the young mother is known for her over-the-top lifestyle, posting photos and videos of herself in exotic locations and undergoing cosmetic surgery procedures paid for in cash. However, Luna's wild ride almost came to a permanent end last week during a horrifying live stream that easily could have been her last. It all started sometime on May 19th when Luna was streaming on Instagram from her home in the city of São Paulo. According to reports, earlier that day, she had broken up with her boyfriend, Alex Oliveira, who is also the father of her 4-year-old daughter, Serena. As a result, the pair had been arguing for some time, something which was later confirmed by neighbors. At some point, though, the shouting turned to piercing screams. It's now alleged these were the sounds of Luna nearly being stabbed to death by Oliveira, who was attacking her with a knife. The whole thing reportedly played out in front of thousands of Luna's followers, several of whom contacted authorities. The aftermath was partially captured on camera, showing Luna covered in blood and walking around with deep gashes on her head, back, hand, and foot. The 22-year-old was stabbed at least 10 times, and the attack was apparently so vicious that part of the knife broke off during the assault. Luckily, police were quick to arrive at the scene, and one of Luna's neighbors ran to her aid and put pressure on her wounds until help arrived. She was taken to a local hospital where she underwent surgery and ultimately survived. In a post she made to her Instagram account afterwards, Luna stated that she felt like she'd been given a second chance at life and credited her daughter with giving her the strength to pull through. She wrote in part, quote, "Surviving 10 stab wounds was not only a miracle, it was a rebirth. Amidst the pain, fear, and uncertainty, I found strength in my little Serena. These were the worst hours of my life, but when she came to mind, I knew I had to live for her." Luna went on to thank many people, including those that had contacted authorities and directly helped her in her time of need, especially her neighbor and her aunt, who had arranged to pick up her daughter from school immediately after the attack to make sure Oliveira didn't try to head there next and kidnap her. Speaking of Oliveira, at the time of this recording, it appears police are actively searching for him. He has been charged with domestic violence and attempted murder, though his whereabouts are currently unknown. A pair of would-be burglars evidently got way more than they bargained for when they broke into a Japanese pawn shop last week, after what started out as a simple smash-and-grab robbery turned into a floundering struggle to escape, thanks to the brave and decisive actions of the store's married owners. It all started at around 2 o'clock in the morning on May 16th at the Ginpodo pawn shop in the city of Kumagaya. The owners of the business were asleep in bed inside their home on the building's second floor when suddenly the 63-year-old husband was awoken by loud noises coming from downstairs. Now, apparently, the couple owned quite a few cats, so initially the man thought that some of them were simply acting up and getting into fights. However, when he went to check, he quickly realized it was a lot more serious. As he made his way down to the first floor, he discovered 2 men robbing his shop. They had forcibly pushed up the metal shutters covering the storefront and had smashed their way through a glass door with a crowbar. At this point, they were stuffing items from one of his display cases into a sack. Despite how terrifying this must have been, the 63-year-old immediately sprung into action. He grabbed a golf club and ran towards the burglars, swinging. He later told reporters, quote, "I couldn't let them get away, so I gave them a bit of a fight." If anything, that's an understatement, though. When the suspects saw him coming, they ran to their getaway car out front, but the store owner refused to give up. Instead, he began repeatedly smashing the windshield of their vehicle with the golf club, his goal being to create as many cracks as possible to obstruct their view. It turned out that the man's wife wasn't far behind. During the commotion, she grabbed her own weapon, a can of insecticide, and before the 2 suspects could react, she'd started spraying the bug killer through the open driver's side window. The burglars did quickly roll up the window, but it wasn't long before the couple outsmarted them again. By this point, the husband had fully made his way through part of the windshield with his golf club. So after getting his wife to pass him the can of insecticide, he started spraying it in through this new opening. Eventually, the suspects realized that they were trapped. They couldn't drive off because they could no longer see through the windshield of their car, but they couldn't stay put either because the vehicle's interior was quickly filling up with poisonous fumes. Left with no other choice, they ran off on foot, leaving all of their stolen loot behind. According to police, one of the suspects, a 69-year-old man, has since been arrested. Authorities are still searching for his accomplice, but they say they believe they know his identity. Authorities in the Thai province of Surat Thani say that a man's unhinged quest for revenge ended with his own death this week when he tried to bomb the home of his ex-girlfriend, only to foolishly blow himself up instead. The strange and disturbing incident unfolded on the morning of May 25th when the man in question, 34-year-old Surapong Tongnak, drove to his ex-girlfriend's place in Chana district. After arriving there around 8 a.m., he demanded to see her and said that he wanted to get back together. It appears that the woman, Kan Anrapat, initially agreed to speak with Surapong. However, she explained that she was not interested in dating again. Besides, they'd only been in a relationship for 2 months anyway. That's when Surapong attacked her. Luckily, several of Kan Anrapat's relatives were home, and they quickly intervened, allowing her to get away and run into the house. Unfortunately, though, no one realized just how far Surapong was willing to go in order to feel like he'd gotten even. After briefly going back to his car, he retrieved some sort of explosive device and threw it at the house. When it failed to detonate, he picked it up, evidently planning to throw it again. That's when it went off in his hand. According to police, the 34-year-old suffered critical injuries to his face and head and was killed instantly. They're currently trying to figure out exactly what kind of explosive device was used and where Surapong got it, but the thing was apparently strong enough that when it exploded, it shattered the windshield of a nearby pickup truck. It also injured 3 of Kan Anrapat's family members. The only thing that likely won't come as a surprise to anyone listening is what else police found when they searched Surapong's car. Inside was half a kilo, or 1.1 pounds, of crystal meth. At the time of this recording, authorities say the origins of both the drugs and the explosive device are still under investigation. Authorities in the German city of Hamburg say that well over a dozen people are injured this week following a disturbing knife attack at a busy transit hub that was allegedly carried out by a woman suffering from mental illness. The incident took place on the evening of May 23rd at Hamburg Central Station, located in the heart of the city. It was shortly after 6 p.m., and the place was crowded with passengers trying to get home during the Friday rush hour. Distracted by the fact that a train had just pulled into the station, no one noticed a woman walking along the platform between tracks 13 and 14. However, as the mass of riders waited to board, suddenly things spiraled out of control. The woman, a 39-year-old identified only as Lydia S., was armed with a long knife and began attacking people indiscriminately. Because of the crowding in the train and on the platform, it was nearly impossible for victims to escape. As a result, at least 18 people were stabbed. Of the victims, it's now said that 7 were slightly injured, 7 were seriously injured, and 4 remain in critical condition. They range in age from 19 to 85. Given the circumstances, it's easy to see how things could have turned out far worse. And that's especially true if it weren't for the actions of 2 brave bystanders. After realizing what was going on, a 19-year-old Syrian immigrant named Mohammed reportedly tackled the 39-year-old to the ground with the help of a Chechen man. The pair were able to restrain Lydia S. until police arrived and placed her under arrest. According to local media sources, Lydia S. suffers from paranoid schizophrenia, and for this reason, authorities say that they suspect she was experiencing a mental episode at the time of the mass stabbing. They said there was no indication of a political motive behind the incident, elaborating in a statement, quote, "There was now very concrete evidence of a mental illness on the part of the suspect." However, what many now want to know is why Lydia was out on the streets alone in the first place. German news outlets have revealed that she was previously known to police and had a history of violence, including an alleged attack on a 6-year-old girl at the Hamburg airport just this past February. In fact, it's been reported that Lydia was released from a psychiatric hospital only 1 day prior to the knife attack. One other sad thing worth pointing out is that despite his courageous actions, the Syrian man who helped to stop this week's incident is now apparently the target of an online misinformation campaign. AI-generated posts have been circulating on social media, making all sorts of false claims about the teenager, including that he isn't even a real person. If you look closely at some of these posts, though, you can tell that they are fabricated. For instance, this image, where the lettering on the jacket is messed up, a telltale sign of AI image generation. This is an actual image of Muhammad, as reported by German media. At the time of this recording, it appears Lydia S. remains in custody and has been taken back to a psychiatric institution. Right now, it's unclear where the case will go from here. Before we wrap up, we'd like to take a second to give a huge shout out to everyone who has made it this far into the video. Seriously, thank you so much for watching. If you found today's upload interesting and informative, we'd be honored if you consider liking and subscribing, as well as hitting the notification bell and selecting all notifications to stay up to date with our latest releases. If you're looking for additional ways to help support the channel, we'd love to have you join us over on Patreon. Patrons get ad-free and early access to all of our content, as well as 4 additional stories per week for each of our Crimes of the Week and Crimes of the Week International videos. You can learn more at patreon.com/crimezone, where you'll also find some of the fine folks whose names are currently on screen. All that being said, we understand that not everyone has the means to support financially, and that's totally okay. We appreciate every like, sub, share, and comment that you send our way. Once again, thanks so much everyone, and take care.